we closed the 18th chapter of Shabbat with a statement, V'chol tzorchei milah osin b'Shabbat. All the requirements of circumcision are done on Shabbat. Those were the words that we left with yesterday. And the Rambam comments there, a fascinating comment from the Rambam. Yit ba'aru tzorchei milah beperek shachar zeh. The requirements for circumcision will be elucidated in the next chapter. So he's giving us a pointer, and he's giving us a hint, by the way, because the Mishnah said, V'chol tzorchei milah, all the requirements of circumcision. And that could be a lot. That could be a great deal. So let's have a look. First Mishnah of chapter 19. Next chapter. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Im lo hevi kli me'erev Shabbat mevio b'Shabbat. Rabbi Eliezer says, if he didn't bring an instrument, we're talking about a knife here, on the eve of Shabbat, he brings it on Shabbat uncovered. He walks in the street with it, in other words, so that people know that he's carrying in public on Shabbat to carry out a mitzvah. And then Rabbi Eliezer continues, Uva sakana, m'chasehu al piedim. If we're in a time of danger, Rabbi Eliezer is writing just around the time of the Hadrianic persecutions. It was forbidden to carry out a circumcision at all. In that situation, you'd carry it in the street covered up. But gosh, you wouldn't want to be accused of breaking Shabbat, if you like, in public, but secretly. So you cover it up in the front of witnesses. In other words, witnesses see you covering it up, so they know that you're secretly carrying a knife in the street for the purpose of the mitzvah, not because you're breaking Shabbat. M'chasehu al pi edim. So Rabbi Eli, so we said kol tzorchei milah. We're going to carry all of the requirements. We're going to be able to deal with all the requirements of the milah on Shabbat. So as far as Rabbi Eliezer is concerned, well, to start off with, we can carry the knife. Im lo hevi kli me'erev Shabbat mevio b'Shabbat mugule, open in the street. And Rabbi Eliezer is going to continue. And we know, by the way, that Rabbi Eliezer is an extremist. And we've seen him on many, many occasions through the Mishnayot in Zeraim. So we know Rabbi Eliezer, and we know how he ends up, by the way. Ve'odama Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer then said, Kortin etzim la'asot pechamin. We'd cut down a tree to make charcoal, ve'lasot kli varzel, to make an iron instrument. There's a special mitzvah of carrying out the circumcision on the 8th day. And if we don't have the necessary things to carry out the circumcision on the 8th day, we can even cut down a living tree and build a fire and build a furnace and make charcoal and smelt a knife and create a knife to carry out the circumcision on the 8th day. That is Rabbi Eliezer. And that's his response to the closing Mishnah of the previous chapter, V'chol tzorchei milah osin b'Shabbat. The words that we closed with yesterday, all the requirements of circumcision can be done on Shabbat. That's Rabbi Eliezer, and he takes it literally. And now, of course, you can see why the Rambam is being so delicate when he just comments there. We'll explain that in the next parak. So let's carry on, because Rabbi Eliezer doesn't have the last word. Klal Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva stated a principle. Kol malacha she'efshar la'asot me'erev Shabbat eina dochet haShabbat. Any work which could have been performed before Shabbat, eina dochet haShabbat. It does not set aside the Shabbat, does not supersede Shabbat. V'she'efshar la'asot me'erev Shabbat docha et Shabbat. That which could not be performed before Shabbat does supersede Shabbat. So Rabbi Akiva is going to be a little bit more general. And the Rambam is going to explain this again. Forgive me, but you probably can tell from the last few months, I am fond of the Rambam, and I like to bring him when I can. And he says, Rabbi Eliezer matir lahavi derech rushut. Rabbi Eliezer permits carrying it in the public domain. He means carrying the knife. And, of course, cutting down a tree to make charcoal to smelt a knife. But, ve'ena halacha, this is not the halacha. Ki ha'ikar etzleinu, because our principle, the principle where we live, sheklal natan Rabbi Akiva emet, the principle given by Rabbi Akiva is true. Ve'hamila efshar me'erev Shabbat. We can't carry out the circumcision itself on Erev Shabbat. Well, why not? Because it has to be carried out on the 8th day. There's no way you can carry out a day early, because it has to be done on the 8th day. It's not due on the 8th day. Because the mitzvah is certainly due on the 8th day. But the Rambam is going to rule, and of course the halacha rules, and that's Rabbi Akiva's rule, that everything else should really be done before Shabbat. In other words, we get ready for the Milah before Shabbat. We prepare the knife, we cut down the tree, we smelt, we build a furnace, and so on. But the only work that we do actually to break Shabbat is the Milah itself. And this is explained then in the next Mishnah. Osin kol sochei milah b'Shabbat. We're reflecting the words of the previous chapter. Osin kol sochei milah b'Shabbat. We perform all the necessities of circumcision on Shabbat. And here we are. Mohalin, ufrorin, umotzitzin, v'notnim aleha, ispalint, ve'chamon. We're going to circumcise, we're going to uncover, we're going to suck out the blood. This was considered very important in the time of the Mishnah, and some people still do it, although it's a bit controversial today. I mean, for reasons of hygiene, it's controversial today. Different people do it in different ways. Placing a bandage on it, and cumin. Again, we don't use cumin today as a disinfectant, but it seems like they used cumin. It's chamon in Hebrew. They used cumin as a disinfectant, and they used to put it on the wound to make it heal better. Im lo shachak me'erev Shabbat. If he didn't grind the cumin on Erev Shabbat, lo eis b'shinav v'noten. He grinds it up in his teeth and he applies it. And again, we can see that they didn't have the same concepts. I mean, we wouldn't do this today, right? We didn't, because we know a lot more about infection than they did then. But we wouldn't. But anyway, that's how they used to do it, because we didn't grind it on Erev Shabbat, so we'll grind it in a different way on Shabbat. If he didn't beat up the wine and the oil on Erev Shabbat, so they used to apply a wine and oil mixture to the wound. And this is pretty good now, because the wine is probably a disinfectant, and the oil will be a kind of a soothing, the oil will soothe it. So we might do that today. So we're going to put them on separate. If we haven't made the mixture on Erev Shabbat, we're just going to put them on separately. They used to make a little cap to put on the wound, to bandage the wound. In the first instance, we wouldn't do that on Shabbat. Aval korech aleha smartut. We might just wrap a rag about it. And if it wasn't prepared on Erev Shabbat, remember, we're following Rabbi Akiva now, not Rabbi Eliezer. We're not going to carry it openly through the street. He winds it round his finger and brings it. So he's going to, if you like, he's going to wear the bandage so as to avoid carrying it on Shabbat. And even from another courtyard. And then how are we going to take care of the baby? Now here, actually, the Rambam will go maximalist. And just as we'll see in a minute. We can bathe the infant before and after the circumcision, and we sprinkle warm water over him by hand, but not with we don't use a basin. We're not going to bathe him in a bath. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah Omer, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Marchitzin et hakatan b'yom shlishi shechal liyot b'Shabbat. We can bathe an infant on the third day. That's the third day after the Milah, even if that day falls on Shabbat. Shin Emar, and we learned this pasuk just a few weeks ago. It's from the attack on Shechem. Vayhi, it's from Vayishlach. Vayhi vayom hashlishi biotam koavim. It happened on the third day when they were sore. This is the attack on Shechem by Shimon and Levi. Safek the androgynous ein mechalalim alav et Shabbat. If it's one who's doubtful, and if it's for hermaphrodite, we don't break Shabbat. Rabbi Yehuda matir androgynous. Rabbi Yehuda permits in the case of a hermaphrodite. What's a safek? Well, let's think about someone who's born at twilight on Friday night. He's born at twilight on Friday night. So is the circumcision due? Well, what day is he? We're not really sure what day he's born on. So maybe he's born on the Friday. Maybe he's born on the Shabbat. But we certainly don't have an obligation to circumcise him on Shabbat because we're not certain that the Milah is due on Shabbat. And at the end of the chapter, we'll learn a little bit more about these date games. That's the safek. And the hermaphrodite, well, we're not sure whether the hermaphrodite requires a milah or not. That's really the question that the Mishnah is focused on. And the Rambam, remember, yesterday we learned the Rambam in the case of a woman giving birth who, even if she's blind, we light a candle if she asks for a candle just in order to make her feel better. Even if she can't see the light from the candle, Jerry said maybe she can smell the light so she knows the light's burning. Maybe she knows that the midwife has a light. So we'll light a light even just to calm her down. And now we're going to see the Rambam on bathing the baby. V'chalak Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah al-zeh. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah disagreed. He disagrees with the first opinion in the Mishnah that we have to just sprinkle this baby. Ve'amar ki mutar lichot kol gufo b'Shabbat lifnei hamilah ve'ulachar hamilah b'yom hashlishi lemilah ve'zot harachitza hi harachitza b'chamin ve'ein hefresh b'chan bein chamin shehuchmu me'erev Shabbat uvein shehuchmu b'Shabbat. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says it's permitted to wash his whole body on Shabbat. So here you've got you just hear the medical mind, you hear the experience, both before and after the circumcision, and on the third day. And this refers to washing in hot water, either heated up before Shabbat or heated up on Shabbat. Lefi shehu sakanat nefashot, because his life is in danger. The halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and halacha is according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. In other words, we do for the baby what is required to make him comfortable and healthy after the milah. And then he goes on to say, to comment on Rabbi Yehuda, ve'ein halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The Rambam would not permit in the case of a hermaphrodite, not on Shabbat, because of a safek.